When you think of stories about fairy tale princesses, you'll probably imagine the following: a young, beautiful, and kind princess, an evil villain, and a handsome prince. Princess fairy tales are so popular that new princesses are still being created, and the stories of older, more established princesses are being remade and adapted into modern media. Just take the story of Snow White, for example. The fairy tale Schneewittchen, translated to Little Snow White, was first written down and published in Germany of 1812 by two brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, in their compiled collection of fairy tales titled Grimm's Fairy Tales. Then, in 1937, Walt Disney and Walt Disney Productions released the first full-length, hand-animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Many more adaptations, as well as loosely inspired films, have been made since then, including the ones you're seeing here. The list goes on and on. Walt Disney Studios is also set to release a new musical fantasy film, Snow White, on March 21st of 2025. But why so many different versions of the same tale? Today we'll be looking into the similarities and differences between the tale Little Snow White by the Brothers Grimm and the 1937 film version by Walt Disney, focusing on gender roles, the theme of innocence, and the Damsel-in-Distress trope. So, Little Snow White was published by the Grimm brothers, but there's little known history otherwise. Only their source was Marie Hassenpflug, a German author and family friend who lived from 1788 to 1856, and a couple other unknown informants. The children's fairy tale tells of a kingdom with an evil queen and her beautiful stepdaughter Snow White. The evil queen would ask her magic mirror about the fairest in the land, and after the mirror declares Snow White the most beautiful, the evil queen tries to kill Snow White in order to become the fairest one of all. After being let go by the huntsman sent to kill her, Snow White runs away into the woods to hide in a cottage owned by the Seven Dwarfs when a disguised evil queen comes to kill her 3 times, finally succeeding on the third with a poisoned apple. The dwarfs put Snow White's body in a glass coffin where the prince finds her and wakes her with true love's kiss. Snow White then marries the prince, and the evil queen is forced to dance to her death in hot iron shoes at their wedding. The moral in this story seems clear, telling children not to be too consumed by beauty and appearances and to treat others with kindness. The film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was produced by Walt Disney and Walt Disney Productions, directed by David Hand, and distributed by RKO Studio Pictures. The film's story is based on the written tale, but also arranged and written by these wonderful people. A little bit about the film's history. Walt Disney had been planning his first full-length film, and after a few unsuccessful attempts, he decided on the story of Snow White by the Brothers Grimm. Producing the film was very expensive. Disney ended up mortgaging his house as well as taking out another loan to finish the film. The film was received with a standing ovation from the industry's elite on its first premiere on December 21, 1937 at Carthay Circle Theater in Los Angeles, California. The film shows Snow White as a maid, and while doing chores, a nearby prince hears her beautiful singing and falls in love with her. The rest of the story is pretty much the same as the Grimm's version. The huntsman lets Snow White go, she hides in the Seven Dwarfs' cottage, and the queen comes to poison her with the poisoned apple. The overall moral of the story is the same as the tale. Let's look at the theme of innocence. The film and tale share this theme, but its development is slightly different between the two versions. The biggest differences include a scene in the film where Snow White and the dwarfs sing and dance together, and the most important scene of the queen's demise. After looking into the significance of these changes, we'll see that Disney promotes slightly different gender roles in the original. Firstly, Disney's adaptation seems to place additional importance on purity and innocence. You can see this from the characterizations of Snow White and the evil queen. In the tale, the only description for Snow White is that she is a child who was as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony wood. And the description of the queen is that she was a beautiful woman, but she was proud and arrogant. The film goes into further detail. The young and innocent Snow White wears bright and colorful clothes with a bow in her hair, and her voice is delicate and high-pitched. The older and mature evil queen is a direct contrast with her dark purple dress, black cape, and stern, deeper voice. This contrast is much deeper than just appearances. It's enhanced by the film's scenes and their sequence. The scene of Snow White and the dwarves dancing and singing together isn't in the tale. The scene is filled with bright colors, representing liveliness and excitement. It conveys Snow White's childlike playfulness and her budding friendship with the dwarves, which is completely contrasted by the very next scene of the evil queen disguising herself and brewing the poisoned apple. The scene immediately shifts to a black outline of a castle, where the evil queen stands in a dark room consulting her magic mirror. As she goes down the staircase to her evil lair, there's even crows, cobwebs, skulls, and rats to emphasize the queen's villainous character. Now let's look at the damsel-in-distress trope that's common in princess fairy tales, and is clearly present in this one. In both the tale and the film, Snow White relies on the dwarves and the prince to achieve her happy ending. However, the scene of the queen's demise in the film and tale are different. In the Grimm's tale, the queen goes to Snow White's wedding where she was made to wear hot iron shoes and dance as she burned to death. In the film, the queen was chased up a mountain and off a cliff by the dwarves after poisoning Snow White. The importance of this scene and its relation to the theme of innocence and the helpless damsel is that in the Grimm's version, Snow White implicitly orders the queen's death, marking her loss of innocence and departure from being a powerless young girl. Meanwhile, in the film, the queen falls off the cliff after being chased off by the dwarves. In other words, Snow White retains her innocence and remains a damsel in distress, relying on men, the dwarves in this case, to assure her happy ending. In this way, Disney actually promotes more limited gender roles in comparison to Grimm, who imply that Snow White has some authority by the end of the story in ordering the death of the evil queen. Thanks for watching this video, and if you want to learn some more about the tale of Snow White, here's the list of sources I used.